Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Hello and welcome to this side of the gate. I am so excited tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about the guest that we have. Mr. Dan Baldwin is a full-time author with many books to his credit, to include The Practical Pendulum, They Are Not Lost, True Cases of Psychic Detecting, and The Psychic Detective Guidebook. And also co-authored with Dwight and Rhonda Hull, Speaking with the Spirits of the Old West. Now, with his pendulum and instincts, he has embarked on a spiritual quest to find out about history from those who lived it. Please welcome to this side of the gate. Welcome in, Dan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am delighted to be here.
Oh gosh, we're just so excited to have you. Now, I just want to get a couple things straight. If you don't mind, I ask you a couple questions just to get my listeners introduced to you a little bit. You started having, like what we said, gut instincts and maybe a little intuition at an early age, but you really didn't start honing this till later on in life. Is that correct?
Yeah, in my first paranormal book, I described myself as a psychic on training wheels. Unlike most of my friends who grew up with it, knowing that they had the ability, I came to it really rather late in life, roughly about 20 years ago.
Well, Dan, you find, I don't know, like you said, you had a lot of friends that knew. I've got a lot of friends who were just like you. They came into it a little bit later in life, maybe, just busy with their own lives and really not paying attention till they just settled down a little bit and really started thinking about it. It's kind of like doing exercise. The more you do it, the easier it gets,
Oh, exactly.
Kind of, sort of. So that's, a little bit about that. And you and I have something in common that you don't know. I always feel like I have the advantage because I know a whole lot more about you than you know about me and my listeners, So
it could be dangerous for me.
It could, but it's not going to be tonight. You use a pendulum. Now, a lot of people know exactly what that is, but you go ahead and describe it.
Okay, most people are familiar with, the old farmer out in the North Forty looking for water with the old willow stick, the Y-shaped stick. And they would walk along the ground, and when they crossed the water source, the stick would, turn down. And that's how they knew they were, that's how they knew where the water was.
Right.
Well, that's called dowsing. And I do exactly the same thing, except I use a weight on a string. Mm-hmm. And, you can ask questions, and, for example, a swing to the right will be an answer yes, and a swing to the left would be an answer no. Mm-hmm. And then I ask questions.
Exactly, and it really is that simple. And people
it's very simple. It's challenging because you have to have a lot of patience and you have to work hard at it. But the process itself is remarkably simple.
It is, and that's one of the reasons I asked you that, because I've talked to so many people doing this podcast that are basically going back to a little bit more simplistic things. They might have a recorder going just so they can remember or possibly pick up EVPs, but a lot of people, I myself use dowsing rods. Good old-fashioned, they're bent.
Rod.
Yes. They have that free swing that you can hold on it, and then they I ask them cross for yes or uncross for no, and we go from there. So
It's exactly the same principle,
right.
Just a different tool.
Right, exactly. And it's so simplistic. And the first reason I picked it up was I thought that I was dealing with a battlefield ghost from, say, Civil War. Mm-hmm. And I thought that maybe they'd be a little bit put off by all this equipment and flashing and things going off and buzzing and banging and stuff. So I've always had really good results with it. And from research, reading some of your books and listening to a lot of your interviews, you have as well, my friend.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We use, when Dwight and Rod and I go out, we use the only equipment really that we use other than foot power is my pendulum, and we take along little handheld recorders, real inexpensive, basic handheld recorders. And part of our theory is, like you said, you get all these bells and whistles and buzzers. You start focusing on the electronics, and you start losing your psychic touch.
Yes, and we went through something not too long ago, let's say about 20 years ago or so, where everything started putting the science in, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with equipment and things like that, but they took a lot of the feeling out, and I think like you and I, or a lot of the people that I know, really want to experience that, because there's so much going on with your gut instinct, your natural instincts. Everybody's got it. They just don't listen. They always say follow your gut, don't talk yourself out of your intuition. I think we've learned to maybe override that some, and we're starting to get back, I think. What do you think about that, Dan?
Speaking of the pendulum, that is one of the dangers of using a pendulum, because it is. You can get extremely accurate answers, but if you start thinking about the answer that you want, that's the answer that you're going to get.
Yeah.
So you've got to really trust your gut instinct, and you've got to focus on not trying to get an answer and just allowing the answer to come through. And the simpler you can make that, the easier it is on you, and the better the chances are that you'll get accurate answers.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's just amazing. Now, before we get into the book, and we're all excited to hear about cowboys and outlaws and all the wonderful history you've heard about, tell us a little bit about earlier. You spent over 15 years helping people who were lost, helping families find lost, and working together with others to help find missing people, mostly missing children. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'm not a clairaudient. That's someone who hears voices. That's not the skill that I have.
Right.
But one day, at the end of the day, being a writer, you have rather tense days, and I kind of walk around the neighborhood and I call it dumping the mental trash.
Yes.
And, just kind of walking around and loosening it up. And one night, I swear to God, I heard a voice that said, find missing children. It was just clear as a bell. And, not having any experience whatsoever in that sort of thing, I looked around. There were no cars, no windows open, TVs blaring, no radios. I was by myself. And I kind of tossed it off. But for about 3 months, that thought would not go away. It was just something that was embedded into my brain. And, after about 3 months, I finally just said, okay, show me the door, I'll walk through it. And I started checking, and I realized, I'm not a trained cop. I'm not a private investigator. I have absolutely no training whatsoever in finding missing persons. And it occurred to me that, maybe this psychic stuff will work. And I started hanging out with, going down to psychic bookstores and, meeting some people and talking to some people. And, I tried the tarot cards and different things. And one day I saw a woman with a pendulum, and it just hit me, I can do that. That's something that I can do. So I bought my first pendulum, and basically I'm a self-taught pendulum dowser. And, that's the skill that works for me.
And that's fantastic.
And I got involved with some other psychics, and, we started looking for missing people.
Wow. And with a lot of success, from what I understand.
Pretty good success. I will be the first to admit that, psychics aren't right 100% of the time. But we have a pretty good record.
I think it's really neat too that you got several together, and in a lot of cases, everybody got a little piece of the puzzle. And
exactly.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the chapters in my the Psychic Detective Guidebook. Is any one psychic at any given time is going to be right, and any given time is going to be wrong, and any given time is going to be partly right and partly wrong. So the more psychics you have working together, the more chances are you're going to get what I call a cluster of hits. And if you get a cluster of hits, chances are that's the person you're looking for is going to be within that cluster. So the more pieces to the puzzle you have, the better chance you are of completing the puzzle.
Now, have you heard since that voice that told you, have you heard any voices since like that?
Nope, that's it. That
was the one time.
It was that one time, and then the thought was just, like I said, embedded in my brain. It would not let it go. So that's how I got started.
Well, I can understand. I've experienced that, and it's a very familiar thing when it happens. But I'm just like you. I cannot hear them. That's why I have to use the dowsing rods. And basically, I use the dowsing rods to confirm kind of what I'm feeling, because I'm also empathic. So I feel kind of what the feeling that they're putting out. You know what? You had told a story about, getting a rush of emotion all of a sudden when things change. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I can kind of feel that, and I'm saying, I'm picking up this. Is that correct? Yes or no? And that kind of guides me along. So I can totally understand your stories when you're speaking of, having to stand there and answer, ask many, many yes or no questions just to try to get, okay, where are we going down this path? Where are you taking me? I understand, and I totally respect it, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and you are a hiker. And for the listeners that don't know, you're based around Arizona by the Superstition Mountains. You go hiking out there an awful lot, correct?
Every chance I get.
Yes, I can bet.
I love my desert.
I could just imagine. And so you're out there, and you're just surrounded with all of this, histories and mysteries and everything else. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that? I love the fact that you said you were set out on a historical quest to hear history from those who lived it. That's just fascinating to me. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, if you think about it, I've got to credit my friends Dwight and Rhonda Hull for getting me into this.
Okay.
One thing I'll tell you, Rhonda and I worked together as psychics on missing person cases.
Okay.
And we got to know each other. They live about 2 hours south of me down in southern Arizona. And we got to be friends, through telephone calls and email, but we never met face to face. And through one of our conversations, she said, I was talking to Rhonda, and she said, Dwight and I go out to ghost towns and ghost mines, and we try to make contact with spirits. Why don't you come tag along sometime? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. Mm-hmm. So, I drove down there, and, we started just exploring sites together and enjoying the West. And one day it occurred to us, you got two intuitives, Dwight and Rhonda, who are very good at what they do, and you got me, a pendulum dowser, and I'm pretty good at what I do. The light bulb sort of went off all of a sudden. Well, duh. Why don't we start see if we can make some contact with the people that we know who are here? Mm-hmm. And our theory of action is, we're amateur historians, very serious historians. Mm-hmm. And what better source of information about a location, than the people who lived there at the time?
Absolutely.
So we research history by, interviewing people who lived there.
Just amazing. It's just amazing. And I'll tell you something that I've heard you speak before, and I wanted to tell you that I totally agree with it. You're in that group of people, there's a chemistry,
Yes.
And not only is there a chemistry, it's like being, I've been a musician too most of my life and hang around musicians. It's just like getting on a band. You can get up with just anybody and try to play a song, boy, and if it doesn't mesh, it doesn't mesh. It's going to sound awful, but there's that magic that happens when the right ones get together.
When you're cooking, you're really cooking.
That's right. And that's what you have with them. And I've read the stories, I've the book, and listened to the interviews, both yours and theirs, and you guys together, and it's that kind of chemistry. And I've heard you ask the question, well, have you ever met a lot of negative spirits or gotten treated? You're going to draw what you put out, for one thing. You know what I mean?
I firmly believe so.
Absolutely. And I think you guys are going in with the right intent. And a little something that a lot of people are forgetting nowadays, and that's called respect. You're treating these people with courtesy and, respect, and you're talking to them that way. And, it works for myself and groups of people that I have that chemistry with as well. And we get great results. And I think that's what's hard for people to understand, because I've seen groups go in, and not that one's better than the other, but I've seen them go in, and I've seen them provoking and trying to get a lot of equipment going on and all this other stuff, and just maybe not going in with the right attitude or the right frame of mind at the time and get nothing. And then 3 people going in and just sitting down and being calm and speaking like you're talking to a living person, which basically you are. They're just in a different form, and getting amazing results. Have you seen that?
I think part of one of the reasons of our success is the fact of our attitude. Like, people don't realize when you go into a, quote, haunted house or a place that is haunted, it could be just a ruin or just a patch of dirt someplace. You're still walking into somebody's house, or you're walking into somebody's place of business, or you're walking into some place, where people had a good time, like the Birdcage Theater or something like that. And when you go into somebody's house, you don't provoke. You don't, what we do, we walk in and we, first of all, we thank them for allowing us to be in their space.
Yes.
And politely we ask, we're here. We would like to chat with you. If you're willing to chat with us, would you please talk with us? And then we conduct our sessions. And we're very big on please and thank you.
Absolutely.
And we have never had a negative experience, not one.
And that's just exactly what I'm trying to put out there, because it's, I absolutely believe in trying to get evidence and things like that. I think the machines and the tech, it's just amazing, and it's a wonderment, and I don't pretend to understand any of it, but it's very interesting. But sometimes you can just go in and with the smallest amount and of things to use, like your dowsing, and just the a little recorder for EVPs. And anytime I've ever taken a picture, I've always asked permission first. And if I felt like I didn't have permission, I didn't take it. Because I might be dealing with somebody from a different era who felt differently about pictures.
Well, one thing to consider, if you're talking to somebody, say, from the 1880s or the 70s, 60s, or even further back, they've never seen a camera. They've never seen a box with lights flashing and flickering, and they've never heard these strange sounds.
Exactly.
We always make a point when we hold up our recorders, and, the little handheld recorder is very inoffensive. It's just a little box. And that's not going to make anybody nervous. But we explain, this is a little device. If you speak into it, we can capture your voice, and we can listen to it later. So if you would you please speak into the little box?
Yeah, and I think you're probably getting the results you're getting because of not only the chemistry, not only the energy and the intent that you have, but just you're respectful and you're just a kind soul yourself. So they're going to respond to that.
Yeah, I think one thing your audience would appreciate about our book is the fact that I think because of our attitude, we have extended conversations with spirits. We don't capture just a voice and say, "Hey, we got an EVP, let's go home." We actually talk to spirits for 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes, and we have honest to God conversations. It's cumbersome, but they are legitimate conversations. And the way the 3 of us work together, we kind of back each other up. Dwight and Rhonda can feel something, and I can get confirmation on my pendulum, or I can swing my pendulum and get some information, and they can confirm. The spirit is nodding her head. Yes, we got it.
Isn't that amazing? That's what I mean. It's a great band. It's a great band. You're making great music. and they're joining in, and that's awesome. And it must be such a relief to some of these spirits. Now, this is how I say. I say ghosts if they're here, if they've chose to stay, and I just say spirits if they've crossed over and come back to visit, or that kind of thing. That's just me. Yeah. There's no right and wrong in that. I don't know what you call it. What do you call? Do you use the term ghosts, or do you use spirits, or it doesn't matter?
Generally, mostly we use the term spirit. We don't like the term ghost hunters because we're not hunters. We're guests. We're guests.
Absolutely.
If anything, we're spirit conversationalists.
Perfect. I think that's awesome, and that's it. I've been called a negotiator.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Your goal is not to get in there and grab one EVP and pack up and go home and say, "Hey, I got another EVP for the collection." Yeah, we're trying to to get information from these people, and if they're in a bad place, maybe help them out of a bad place, which we've done a couple of times.
Absolutely, and I think it's wonderful. And that's basically, the way I'm doing this is to set the listeners up to understand, a little bit about what you do. And the listeners here that listen to this show, they already, they already believe in ghosts. They're right there with us, Dan. I'm so tired to try to prove to people that ghosts exist. I'm tired and I'm old. You prove to me they don't. Do you know what I mean?
I'm in the same boat. People come up to me, at a book signing or something, and I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, and I tell them right off the bat, I am not in the missionary business. Mm-mm. I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. Here's the story. There's the documented evidence. You can read it and make up your own mind. But
right.
I'm not a missionary.
Right.
I was there. I know what happened. That's good enough for me.
There you go. I'm right there with you, Dan, because there's just too much time spent on that. How do you know you're hearing this? How do you know? Because it's a combination of things. There is a feeling. There is an emotion in the air. The air changes. Everything is different, and it's hard to explain to somebody who's not there. It's like trying to explain how a hug feels to somebody who's never had a hug. It's just
like that
hard.
movie Contact with Jodie Foster. Mm-hmm. Did you love your dad?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, prove it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you prove it? Well, I was there. I felt the love. I felt the emotion. That's what I've got to go on.
Perfect.
It's the same way when dealing with spirits. I was there. Mm-hmm. I know what I felt. I know what I heard. I know the information I got, and I know it was confirmed. Mm-hmm. That's enough for me.
Right, and I think it's wonderful. And the way the book is laid out, it's fantastic because there's also links in there that if you did get an EVP and they have, that you can go to it and you can hear it. After while you're reading the book, it's fantastic. The website is great, and we will give all the links too. And you've got several, and of course you've got all the books too, so you can find out everything they wanted to know. But this one here with the cowboys, and everybody thinks Tombstone and everything around it, but you guys go out and get into the mountains and go into different spots too. You don't just hit the same old ones over and over again. Would you tell us a little bit about the outskirts around there and some of the people that you've bumped into? And I'll say people because to me they're just people in a different form. Tell us a little bit about that.
My friend Dwight says they're just people without bodies.
Exactly. Because you found out so much with this group about not just ones that are here that will communicate, that for whatever reason have decided of their own free will or fear or whatever not to cross. And then you've found out that many have crossed over and decided to come back and visit places that they were happy before. And they're not stuck at all. They're doing just fine. They're reliving happy times. Tell me about a couple of those. There was a gentleman that got married and he came back for the wedding again. Tell me about that. That was awesome.
Yeah, we were at a place. It's south of a town called. It's south of a town called Florence. It's a abandoned ranch area called the 96 Ranch in a place called the 96 Hills, way off the highway. And we went back there, and there's still the remnants. A couple of buildings are still standing. A couple of ruins. One of the houses has been burned down, and then there's the old barn is there, and it's got a cement floor. That's important. Mm-hmm. And we went to the different locations, and we weren't getting anything. And then we got to the barn, and we made contact, and we recorded an interesting EVP. We've got the sound of cowboy boots with spurs walking across a wooden floor. Mm. So this is on concrete.
Right.
Right. That was in the middle of the conversation, and the story is, it's a happy spirit story. Mm-hmm. This guy was he was a ranch hand. And he got married in 1939, and he had, the boss put on a big party for him. They had, they were passing the jug, and they were playing the fiddles and playing the guitars, and they were dancing, and he was getting married. And he was a typical ranch hand. He had his best, coat on, but he still had on his work pants. That was dress up. But, he was having a ball. It was the happiest day of his life. All right, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, World War II. Mm-hmm. He joins the Marines, goes over, and is killed in the one of the islands in the Pacific. Oh. Yep. And so he never got to come back. Mm. So we thought, or so people thought. Mm-hmm. But that's the guy we got to talk to. And we asked him, why are you here? I mean, you could... you passed on, you crossed over. He said, well, this is the happiest day of my life. I come back here, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, basically, I come back here and relive the happiest day of my life. I'm with all my best friends. I'm at a big party. We're all happy. I'm with the woman I love. We're going to get married. Mm-hmm. My life is just beginning, and it's just a happy experience.
Wow. So he basically, when he passed, He did cross over. And apparently, I guess whatever you do over there, you get choices. And he chooses every once in a while to come back and relive the happiest day of his life. And it all plays out for him right there. How amazing is that?
That has come up several times. We've talked to people, we'll be out in the middle of the desert someplace. At one time was a ranch or someplace, and we'll just say, why were you here? Why are you here? And the answer will be, well, I was happy here. My life was here. I enjoyed it. Well, one of the things we're searching, and I will be the first to say we don't have the answers. But apparently, once you cross over, there are a number of options available to you. And one of those options is to obviously come back over. Because we found people who, for example, there's a little girl at a town called Gleason. It's a ghost town now. It was a mining town. And the miners would come out of the mine, and at the end of the day, and this little girl, little blonde girl would run down, and she was kind of the angel of the camp. She was a touch of home. She brightened up the lives of the miners. Well, she died and crossed over, and now apparently she comes back to visit the spirit of the miners, and in some cases comes over to tell them it's okay for them to cross over.
Trying to get them to cross. Bless her heart.
But some of them, we run into that. Sometimes you'll run into a trapped spirit.
Absolutely. And, the way you tell the story, she's not trapped. She can come and go as she pleases. You know what I mean? The visitation. I don't know... Dan, if I could get a hold of this rule book, we'd be millionaires. I'll cut you in. Because somebody's got this rule book now. The doggone target keeps moving.
We asked that specific question one time. The movie Beetlejuice, where when you cross over, you get the Spirit's Guidebook.
Oh, yeah.
That movie?
Yes.
So we asked, is there a guidebook? And we got the answer no.
Yeah. You must just get told, this is what you can do. And it's probably as individual as each of us are, too. There's probably people that don't get a choice. They've got to go do something else to, for comeuppance or something, sit and chill for a while or whatever it is, get a new lesson plan or something. But then if, some of them, they choose to go back. I want to go back and talk to these miners that are still here and tell them that it's okay to cross. Now, see, I've run into that too. And what you're saying is meshing up with what I've seen in some cases. Not as much, because I haven't been out as much as you. But it's amazing when you find somebody you never knew before and you hear them talking, I'm going, oh, that matches with mine. And that's what this show is all about. That's why we tell it like it is. So other people can match it up with their experiences, and we can we're never going to get all the answers, but we can understand a few of them a little bit clearer because we're just telling it like it is,
Exactly. We're just passing along the information get as we get it, and every time we go out, we learn something new.
Isn't that amazing? Now, she says, when you got to speak to her, did you get to find out, you said that she was coming to maybe help some miners. Did she ever say she got some to cross, or maybe some of them can't even see her? Maybe they're all caught up in their own turmoil. She can't even get through. But did she ever get any to go across? Did you ever ask?
I think our answer would have to be all of the above. I think she got through to some, and I think I think some of them are there because they're happy to be there.
Right.
And she's just there brightening up their life like she did, 150 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
A sweet little spirit. Look at her.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Now, you said that you've, if I might correct me if I'm wrong, but you have never really seen, say, a full-on apparition that you know of.
No, I do not have that skill. Dwight and Rhonda, and especially Rhonda, are very gifted at that. They can sense it, and oftentimes they can actually see the form of the spirit. I don't have that skill. I have to use the pendulum.
Right. See, I used to when I was younger, but I asked for that to stop. I couldn't take it because I usually only see the ones that are earthbound and never crossed, and then I get their pain and everything together, and it was just so much all at once. It's hard to take.
There's a lot of that. In fact, if you got a few minutes, I can tell you a real interesting story about that.
Dan, I've got all the time you want.
But talk about, this is one of the most interesting stories about crossing over, then coming back. It's also, I think, the most emotional moment in my entire life. Dwight and Rhonda and I do some fundraising for wounded warriors. And we were down doing a session in Tombstone. And what we do is we invite people in. They pay X amount of dollars, and we take them around to different haunted places. I give them a tour of haunted sites. We do little seminars. I'll do my pendulum seminar, and they'll talk about their stuff. And all the money that's collected is turned over to Wounded Warriors. Mm-hmm. And we were down in Tombstone, and as luck would have it, we bumped into a film crew out of New York who were down there. They were down there doing a story, a documentary on Tombstone. And they bumped into us and said, "Hey, do you mind if we tag along?" And we said, "Sure." And the reason I told you that is because what I'm about to tell you is fully documented and accessible.
Wonderful.
We went to a place that night. This was the last night. It was Sunday night. And Dwight and Rhonda and I were just physically exhausted. This was a session, in the evening, and we went to a place in Hoptown, which is the old Chinatown in Tombstone. And it's a modern building, but it's on the side of an old general store, probably a drug emporium, a heroin place. Mm-hmm. But the idea was to take all the participants and let them go in there and play psychic, basically. They had the different tools, and one group set up at a table, and they were playing cards, and they had the shot glasses in bottles, and they were pouring empty bottles like they were drinking whiskey. The other group, bellied up to the bar, and they were, pouring empty whiskey bottles, but they were pretending to drink whiskey. And Dwight and Rhonda and I went to 3 different parts of the room and basically just collapsed. And we were watching the show, and it was being run by our guest of honor, who was Brian Cano. If you've watched the Haunted Collector TV show, you know Brian. Mm-hmm. And we said, "Brian, this is your show. We're out of here." So he's kind of doing his bit about the psychic work. And one of the ladies who had attended my pendulum class early in the day had bought a pendulum, and she was working the pendulum. And she was, getting some kind of contact. And this was her first day, so she really didn't know what she was doing. She was giving it, the old college try. Mm-hmm. And Brian said, hey, Dwight, come over here. We're into something. So Dwight comes over. Now, Dwight's, retired military. He was also a military cop, so he knows how to conduct an investigation. So he starts asking questions. And he goes, "Yeah, there's something going on here." So he says, "Hey, Dan, come over here." So I get up, walk all the way across the room, and start working the pendulum. I didn't have my pendulum with me that time, but the lady next to me had a large necklace. And I said, "Can I borrow your necklace?" And so her necklace became my pendulum. Mm-hmm. And I started, there's definitely a spirit here. There's definitely a frightened and very sad spirit here. I said, "We need Rhonda." So Rhonda comes up. So at that point, for me, everything kind of went dark except for me, Dwight, Rhonda, Brian over in the corner, and the spirit we were talking to. Mm-hmm. And the spirit was a Chinese man who had committed murder back in the 1880s, and he had killed his brother on that site. We were on the place where he had killed his brother. And I was doing the pendulum and said, "Hey, there's another spirit here." So the 3 of us are working, and we realized after asking a few questions, it was his brother had come back over. So we had the murderer and the murder victim, who were brothers.
Right.
And the victim had come over to tell his brother, "I forgive you. Mm-hmm. It's all is forgiven. You don't need to be afraid to cross over. Come on, it's okay." And so the murderer was just terrified of crossing over. So, the 3 of us are working with this guy. So you had me, Dwight, Rhonda, and the spirit of a murder victim working on the murderer, trying to get him to cross over. And at one point, I don't remember this, but they tell me the pendulum just did a complete circle in my hand and then dropped. And at that moment, I said, "They're gone." Mm-hmm. And at that instant, I broke out crying. Dwight started crying. Rhonda started crying. I looked up. Everybody in the room was quiet. There was a wave of emotion, the most powerful emotional event, really, of my life. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of waved through the whole audience. And I swear there were like 40 people weeping instantly, just like that.
I can imagine. That's beautiful.
But it's a great story because, you had a guy who was afraid to cross over because of the guilt he felt over committing murder, and the murder victim was coming over saying, "I forgive you. Come on, it's okay."
It's beautiful.
It was powerful.
It is. That's very powerful. And see, that's one of those things that you cannot explain to someone unless you were there. I've had that experience. Not exactly the same, but very similar. And you can feel the lift in the energy in the room. Everything just gets lighter, and you can almost feel them go.
Yeah, it was like, I tell people, I'm not that good an actor. I can't cry on cue.
Exactly. It is. It's a wave
and
of emotion.
It was overpowering.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing, you couldn't fight it or anything. It was just wham.
It just hit you because it's energy, Dan. And we're all, in the ways of energy, we're really all connected. And you were feeling, that whole room was feeling what he was feeling. I mean, that was say it again, 1880?
Back in the 1880s, yeah.
So look how long. And they say time is different and all that other, But listen, someone was suffering for that amount of time and feeling grief over killing his brother and whatever went on between them and,
And feeling fear.
Absolutely. And that's like the number one reason I think that people don't cross, really. It's fear of what's going to happen to this. I like I said, I do a lot of, like, Gettysburg. I'm surrounded here by Revolutionary War battlefields. I'm right here in the middle of it. I got all this all around me. And, dealing with soldiers on the battlefield, very, very similar. You were just you're on a different battlefield, the Old West. All the stuff that happened there. Boy, if that dirt could talk, the stuff that went there. But that is absolutely beautiful story. And see, nobody can take that away from you. You're not going to get everybody to believe it, but that's fine. That's their problem. They might not even be ready, maybe not supposed to understand it now. But everybody in that room did, and that's enough because that guy crossed and he got to be with his brother, and that is amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't talk about it for 3 days.
I understand.
I was going to tell my wife about it, and I couldn't. I would start talking, and I would tear up. I couldn't talk about it for 3 days. It was that powerful.
Well, it's probably, too, the gratefulness. Here too, strangers come in, and that's the difference. That's what we said in the beginning. Strangers can come in and help, or they can just say, "Hey, I got an EVP. I'm going home now."
Yeah.
And then what?
I got something to add to my collection of EVPs. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that spirit's still sitting there because, again, like I said, if you go into any place, and I know you experience this because there's an awful lot of, I don't know if there's ghost tours around Tombstone. I'm sure there is in Tombstone because I know there's reenactments and gun battles.
There are ghost tours all over the place.
Okay. So you imagine those spirits just say, here comes another one, here comes more, here comes another one. And they don't even want to participate anymore. And if they were in a darkened state of despair or anger or whatever they were in or being lost, they're even more lost now because they just move away from it. And it takes a special energy, people, and compassion and respect to walk in there and get them out. It's like therapy, almost.
Yeah, well, imagine, if you're a spirit and you're in a location and you're trying to have a good time, and these people basically intrude on you and they start asking, personal questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was Doc Holliday like in bed? Ha, 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 ha.
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
It's terrible.
It is awful. And like I said that in the beginning, is it respect? And, how would you want to be treated?
Exactly.
That's exactly it. And I know so many of the different people that you bump into, their stories are just amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about, let me see if I can find Uncle Simon.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
We just concluded a really happy ending to that story.
Good.
We went to a ghost town called Cortland,
and
that's there's a jail there that's still intact, and that's in fact where Dwight Ron and I had our first encounter, and that's when we knew, hey, we're on, the three of us, we're onto something. So 2 or 3 years later, we discover through we've got some friends down there, and they said, Cortland has a cemetery. We never heard about that. So we went out there, and basically it's scrub desert, scrub trees, and old wooden crosses stuck in piles of rocks. Yeah, it was in very, very poor condition, completely neglected. And we found one concrete site with a white military marker, like you see at the military cemeteries.
Yes.
And it was busted in half. Not malicious intent, just cows roam out there, and cows had just kind of stomped the graveyard to pieces. And they had broken this gravestone in half. and it was a character by the name of Uncle Simon. And Uncle Simon was, 6'2", 6'4", black man, had served in the Union Army, moved out west, settled in Cortland, had a ranch, and apparently had a business there. And he was one of the most successful and one of the most popular men in town. And the records state that when he died, he had the largest turnout of any funeral in the Cortland's history. It came out to his funeral.
Wow.
So mainly through Dwight and Rhonda and some other people, we were able to get a new headstone for Uncle Simon, and we just put that into place last week, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got a brand new grave and everything.
Wow, that's wonderful. Did you ever get to talk to him, or did you talk to other spirits about him?
We talked primarily to other spirits about him, and we got a little conversation with him, just chit-chat, basically.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. Now, here I'm going to ask you another question to clear up some questions that I've heard you asked on other interviews. People will say to you, Dan, why are they hanging out at their grave? And you say, well, I don't know. Here's your answer. They're not. You connected into their energy when you asked for them, and they felt like coming and answering you. They're not hanging out their grave. You just connected into that energy, and they, just like that little girl, they came to visit, go, what's going on? Not everybody is stuck and no, they're not hanging around. But the minute it's just like I said, you connect into that, the thought of them.
Well, imagine, let's say you're the spirit of a miner, and you're working 12-hour days, and you come out of the mine. But where are you going to go? You're going to go to Boot Hill, or you're going to go to the Birdcage Theater where the women, the wine, and the song is?
Yes.
Well, you're not going to hang out at the cemetery.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
You're going to go where you had a good time.
Yeah, and I often wonder too. And I guess you answered that question about the party with the man with the wedding. He's seeing it as it was then, even to the point of the cowboy boots sounding on the wooden floor, not the concrete floor.
Right.
So that
even had the Doppler effect, because you could hear it in the distance, and it got louder as it got closer to us, and then it kind of faded away as it walked away. It was real interesting.
It's amazing. Almost like you're pulled into their reality at the same time, you're kind of going into, back and forth, like it's a bleed over somehow. And when you were telling that story, I thought to myself, and I wondered, these EVPs, or like you hear about people in a haunted house, and they say, there was a party going on. I heard a party going on. And people think right away that there's a haunting of people having a party, when it could just be what that young man was doing. He came back to visit a party that you know what I mean? And you're hearing that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a haunted cocktail party going on. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's
you're reliving their memory.
Cyclical or something like that. I'm not sure I believe in that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That there's so many different questions out there. We might just be hearing something, or it could be, I don't even know whether it's the time. I don't know. I think that we might very well be hearing them reliving their thing at that moment, and then they go and it goes with them, instead of being haunted all the time. No,
I agree with you completely. I think that's, hey, let's go play cards. Let's go to the Birdcage and play a card game.
Yeah, why not? Because like I said, people are still trying to get... Listen, Dan, I've talked to people who say, well, how can my house be haunted? Nobody's died here. So,
well, you don't know that.
You don't know. First of all, you don't know it. And second of all, not necessarily did someone have to die there for it to be haunted. It could be somebody down the road that had a car accident, or somebody, or what we're talking about, somebody coming back and just reliving, or somebody who's crossed over and missing you and coming there and trying to get your attention or something. There's so many different levels. And I think it's wonderful that you guys are getting in there. And, it's like this big basket of yarn that's all raveled together, and sometimes we can unravel a couple of colors and kind of get a little idea of what we're holding here, a little bit. And then you look at the basket and go, we haven't even touched the surface yet, So,
well, I can tell you another interesting story about that, because a house that's located today was a good place for a house 100 years ago. It was also probably a good place 1,000 years ago, or maybe 10,000 years ago. If you're near near a water source, and there's plenty of game about this. Chances are people have been living at that spot. It may be a brand new house, but people may have been living there for 10,000 years. And that we ran into that one time. There's a location not too far out of Tombstone, but it was a Spanish fort built by basically the conquistadors, if you want to get specific. But before the Mexicans, they had the Spanish here, and they built an area called the Presidio. It's still a ruin there. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. And we hiked out there, and that's a good site for a location, for thousands of years. And so we fully expected we were going to pick up or make contact with Spaniards or Mexicans or cowboys or perhaps even some Apaches, because the Apaches eventually drove them out. The Spanish moved in 1776, and they didn't last very long. The Apache said, "Nope, you're not staying here," and they eventually pulled out. So that's what we were expecting. And we sat down and found a quiet place, and we made contact with some people. And it turned out we were having trouble not communicating, but trying to understand each other. And it turned out that we were in a location that was inhabited by basically Cro-Magnon mammoth hunters. 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Now that's incredible.
There's been proof that the Cro-Magnon people were in Arizona for at least 10,000 years. So that's historically feasible. And we were right above the river, and we were talking to them, and we tried to. The way we figured this out was we were asking them about bow and arrow. We thought we were talking to Indians,
right?
And we couldn't make them understand bow and arrow. And I tried to make them understand the atlatl, which is a throwing stick. They didn't understand that. Then I finally asked them if they use spears, and I got a yes on that. And then I described what is called a Clovis point, which is a prehistoric spearhead.
Okay.
It's definitive of that time frame, 10,000 years ago.
Okay.
And they said, yes, that's what we used.
Wow.
And then we got into, well, did you hunt very big animals? Yes. Did these animals, were they very hairy? Yes. Did they have very long noses? Yes. So we figured out, okay, we're talking to cavemen, basically.
Right. And, the tusks on them, I remember hearing you tell this story, and you said just the size of the tusks were bigger than a man. So you basically have to figure out that this is who you're talking to. And then people will say, well, how do they know English? Well, I can tell you this right now. In some cases, I've had, a situation where somebody would normally speak just only Polish, but they're understanding what we're saying. Now, how that is, I don't know. Do you, if somebody's crossed over, do you get, I don't have those answers. Or maybe telepathically, they're understanding the energy and the thoughts you're putting out there. We're not going to know that. The fact is you were getting the answers, and they all added up to Cro-Magnon.
Right, and we were definitely, there's no way we could speak the same language.
Correct.
That's just, that language has been dead 10,000 years.
Sure.
But we were still able to communicate.
Right.
They wanted to talk to us, and we wanted to talk to them, and we were able to make conversation.
And it's amazing. And like I said, it could very well be telepathic. The same way people, who are psychic or psychic mediums, they'll say, well, how are you getting this? I'm getting it in images. I'm getting it. They're showing me pictures. That could have very well been it. That is amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't emotional or anything, but it was just fascinating that we went out there, expecting fully to talk to Spaniards or Apaches, and we ended up with Cro-Magnon.
I can imagine the faces, Dan. You're all looking at each other, eyes big as saucers, going, ask him this,
I think I think at the time, I think we're talking to some very old people.
Yes. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were haunting. Could have just been like the little girl coming back to visit, and you were looking for somebody to talk to, and they said, "Hey." And that's the cool part about this, because there does seem to be a lot of different things going on. It's not just the ghost that's stuck in the closet that can't find its way out. There's so much else going on. Yeah. And that's what you guys are also trying to figure out. And our mantra here on this show is, what's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. So that's why, just talking to you is just so exciting, because you guys are really finding out a lot of good answers that are matching up with other people. And that's
and
what
we're
this
just
whole
touching
thing...
now, but literally we're at the tip of the iceberg.
Right, exactly. And I'm sticking with you guys. I mean, this isn't the only time you're going to be on this show. You got to come on and tell us more and more and more and keep us going, because you've got so many...
We have book 2, so don't worry about that.
Oh, I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, we're in negotiation with publishers right now for our follow-up book.
This is wonderful. This is wonderful, because you're also on some other very interesting cases that I'm just excited about. Now, one of them that breaks my heart, and I know it's very close.
That'll be Maddie.
Yes, it would be. And I know she's very close to you, too, and I could almost just feel like I'm going to lose it a little bit here. Well, I know a little bit about her story, her little backstory, and how she, she didn't want to grow up on the farm, and she had very strict, parents, and it's more,
right.
The whole Ten Commandments thing, and she just... speak when you're spoken to. And I think her older sister got married, and once she left, she was like, I'm not staying here, and took off with her younger sister, did she not?
Yes, that is correct.
Greener pastures. And you know how we are when we think we know all the answers. And this poor girl wound up in, I don't know what town. I know she eventually wound up in, some of the more famous ones. But then, there wasn't a lot of jobs available for young ladies back then, and she wound up being a prostitute. Now, her younger sister left and went back home with her tail between her legs, basically, and they accepted her reluctantly, right?
I believe so.
Okay, and then now Maddie...
It's since I've researched her sister, but yes, I believe so.
Right.
Maddie stayed out west.
Yes, and she stayed. Now, tell us a little bit about Maddie, and, she was common law wife of...
Wyatt Earp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you've seen the movie Tombstone, or if you've seen the movie Wyatt Earp, you know Maddie Earp. She was the common law wife of Wyatt Earp, and Wyatt, met, the love of his life, Josie, and basically just abandoned Maddie in Tombstone.
True.
And Maddie ended up in a little town. It's now a ghost town called Pinal. It's within the city limits of Superior, Arizona. It's a little bit to the west of Phoenix. And she's buried at the Pinal Cemetery, which is up on the hill overlooking Pinal. And Maddie ended up, at the end of the line, living in a shack. She died of a laudanum and alcohol overdose, and most everybody thinks, a broken heart. She had a really hard life.
She was basically abandoned, and when Josephine came along, I'm not blaming her, because, Wyatt was just as, but Josephine basically tried to erase her out of his past,
definitely.
And there she is, and I think she left with some of his siblings and went off to a town and basically sat there and waited for him to send her a telegram, tell her, where to come meet him, and nothing ever came.
Yeah, that was in California, and she finally, went back to, I think she ended up, not back in Tombstone. I believe she went to Globe, and then she ended up in Pinal City. And Pinal was a milling town. One of the largest silver strikes, the Silver King mine, was located a few miles away, and they did all the milling in Pinal. In fact, there's still trail ruts through the rock. You can see where they dragged the wagons into Pinal. But she lived there and died tragically.
She did.
The interesting thing, she was very popular, apparently. The people of Superior, to this day, are very protective of Maddie.
Good. It's about time. There's so many stories like this, but here's one that we can kind of pin down. She had migraines, probably what was known as migraines, and that's why she started on the laudanum, and then the broken heart on top of everything else.
She had very bad teeth, which caused
pain.
Tremendous headaches.
Yeah.
Enormous pain.
Yeah. And then to just be abandoned, and basically she goes back to this town thinking, okay, that was a happening town when the mines were going, and then she gets there and the mines aren't going so good anymore. The people are few. She can't make any money as a prostitute because that's all there really was left, and that's just so sad. Now, since you've been going, you've talked to Maddie a couple of different times. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you found out through Maddie? Because I hear she's almost kind of a part of your team when you go out there.
Yeah, I can tell you some, and I've got to tease your listeners a little bit. Maddie has taught us an awful lot, and there's some revelations in our second book.
Okay.
But in the first book, we went out to the cemetery. We were exploring Pinal, and I just said, hey, Maddie Earp is buried up there. Let's go to the cemetery. So we just went up there somewhat on a lark, and somewhat, hoping to do some investigation. And, Rhonda was starting feeling that there was something going on. So we sat down and we did a session, and we made contact with Maddie. And I think, again, I don't think she was hanging out at the cemetery.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah.
I think she felt our energy and was drawn to our specific energy. And we just happened to be at her gravesite at the time. Now, I'll tell you this, there is a marker, a very nice marker in the cemetery to Maddie Earp, but it's not on her actual gravesite. Only a very few people know where she's really buried. And I'm one of them. So we were on her gravesite, which is unmarked, and we made contact with Maddie, and we were trying to convince her, you're living a sad life. We could feel the sadness. I mean, that was palpable. It was coming through.
Yeah.
And we were trying to tell her, and Rhonda is very good about talking people into crossing over. I mean, he's the best I've ever seen at it. And with the three of us especially, we're working, Maddie, it's okay. Whatever you're afraid of, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Whatever is holding you back is just holding you back. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. You can let go. And she refused to let go. She said, I have to stay here. And it was our impression at the time that she just felt completely unworthy of going on to her final reward. It was very powerful.
Right. It's going to take a couple times.
Anything, but you could feel the emotion. You could feel the sadness.
Right.
Now Maddie has, Dwight and Rhonda have invited her. Said, anytime you want to come by our house, anytime you want to come out with us, you're invited. So she's kind of an unofficial part of our team.
That's wonderful.
And they have, Rhonda gave her a code, which I won't reveal, but there's a certain signal. Whenever Maddie is around, if we hear that signal, we know it's Maddie.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's happened several times.
Right. Well, see,
and
with
we
that,
went back,
you just might.
Let me throw in the teaser real quick.
Go ahead.
We went back for another session and talked some more with Maddie, and she gave us a real revelation. She gave us an education. It was stunning. Let me put it that way, and that's in book 2. It was a stunner.
Okay. Now she still has not crossed. She's still hanging out.
She has, as of the last time we talked with her, she has not crossed.
Okay.
And as soon as book 2 is out, I'll come and tell you why.
Oh, please do. As soon as book 2 comes out, you just call me up and I'll start recording.
Oh, you'll know. But it's an interesting story. But
yeah, I think that's
Maddie's
wonderful.
It's a tragic tale of the old West.
Right. Well, I'm sure she's, said all the different. She probably felt that she wasn't worthy of Wyatt, because I just get a feeling with her that she took on everything. Everything was her fault. She was probably the way she was brought up. It's your fault. You did this. You deserve that. That kind of thing. That's what I'm picking up from her. And Wyatt was just so good, and anything he did was all right, that kind of thing. I'm just getting that kind of feeling, and she probably blames herself and not. She might be.
I can confirm that. You're right. Yeah. You're right on target.
This is how I'm feeling with that, and she's just taking it all on herself. and I have to stay here, and I've seen it before in other spirits. I have to stay here. This is my purgatory. This is my karma. This is my punishment. Whatever.
Yeah, and it's so unnecessary.
It is, and if you keep working with her, you've gained her trust, and you showed her your intent, your group, and eventually, you'll get somebody like maybe her sister or someone else, or maybe Wyatt himself, to come through the light and show her they're telling you the truth. And sometimes they can pull them back over. Sometimes if you can get their loved ones to show up to come and help cross them, like that little girl, then they'll go, okay, and they'll go. But it's going to take a lot. It's like I said, it's like therapy. She's been like this how long? So you think about it. She might be that way a little while longer, but you guys got a really good shot at helping that poor spirit cross. And I'm pulling for you.
That's what we're hoping for. Personally, I would like to help her cross over and let her know, if you want to come back, you can cross over, and then you can come back anytime you want to.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to stay here and suffer. You can cross over, and if you want to come back to a happy time, you can come back to a happy time.
Yeah, let a lot of that burden grow. But see, the hard part is usually getting this is like going back to the soldiers again. Can you imagine talking to soldiers that are still fighting 150 years later? So it's the same type of thing, but trying to get them to remember what love felt like to somebody who didn't feel a whole lot of love when they were alive is a very hard thing. But usually...
Yeah, they have no experience.
Right, right. But you guys are showing her that now in some ways. So you've got a real good chance. So don't you give up on that one, okay?
Oh, no.
Okay, terrific. John Ringo, and I won't call him Johnny.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, what a story this one is.
Yeah, John Ringo is has been for a long time a hero to Dwight, who's lived in Arizona a long time. Lived in Tombstone, I think, 14 or 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And right and wrong, the case is still open.
Mm-hmm. Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and we think we solved it.
Okay.
And we've turned in reports to the county sheriff.
Okay.
We're trying to get the case at least to a slightly higher status.
Mm-hmm.
Than it's suicide. It's ruled suicide now. We're trying to get it moved up to unsolved.
Okay.
But we went to his gravesite, which is easily accessible, and where he's buried right where he was murdered. And again, you've got the burial marker, then you've got where he's actually buried. And we've made contact with John Ringo, and the reason we call him John is because early on we were, like everybody else, we were saying, Johnny Ringo, would you tell us this? Mm-hmm. Johnny Ringo, would you tell us that? Johnny Ringo, what was it like? And we got a very clear EVP that says, I can't say this in polite company, but expletive deleted the Johnny.
Uh-huh.
He does not like the name Johnny. He wants to be called John Ringo.
John. And he's a very misunderstood character, from what I understand.
He wasn't the killer everybody thinks he is.
Uh-huh.
I think I believe there's only one confirmed killing that he was actually involved with.
And he
wasn't. We think he was murdered. We firmly believe he was murdered.
I mean, he did hang out with Ike Clanton and the boys, right?
Oh yeah.
But and he was known to be a little bit of a nasty drunk. I mean, I know plenty of people like that when they drank, they got a little crazy.
Yep.
But
when they found him, they found him sitting at the base of an oak tree by the creek. But his gun belt was put on upside down, and he had been shot in the head, so the top of his head the back of his head was blown off, but he still had his hat on.
Yeah, something's up.
So it looks like the crime scene has been dressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And he's kind of given you a couple of things. I know you don't want to say it now because I think that's another... Is that in the second book or is that a different book completely?
No, we've talked about this before. It's not a secret. Our theory is that he was shot by Buckskin Frank Leslie, probably aided by Billy Claiborne. That's our theory.
Okay. And it was just over, whatever they were into.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And, you just got to wonder how many of those. I mean, gosh, the West, I mean, there were so many. I mean, that's how they settled arguments. And, if you were a fast gun, you had 15 people lining up to show you that they were faster than you, and just the death and everything that was going on,
the code of the West, they call it, man has to defend himself, was very legitimate. I mean, those were rough times.
Sure.
So gunplay was often, and it wasn't always, bad people doing bad things. It was a lot of times good people just defending themselves.
Right. Well, over a poker game, if somebody said you cheated, I mean, if you're lucky enough to win, you better be lucky enough to get out the door with it, and then lucky enough to get out of town.
If somebody draws on you, or if there's somebody waiting outside the saloon with a gun, what are you going to do?
Nothing. Yeah, that's why I always look at coal mining like that. If people think coal mining or any kind of mining was, such a wonderful thing, there was so much devastation around that. And if you found something, chances are you had 40 guys with a rock wanting to put it in your head to take what you found. I mean, that's just the way it was. And these poor women. Gold mine. Oh, yeah.
Same way in the gold mines or the silver mines.
Exactly. I mean, it was a rough and tumble place and a lot of wide open space for things to happen. And I guess, John Ringo had something happen to him. I'm glad you guys are on it trying to get that changed up because, anytime, I think we are now taking history and saying, okay, we were wrong. Listen, I'm Native American. I'm Cherokee and Lenape. And I'll tell you, my people...
I'm Cherokee, too, on both ends.
There you go. Well, see, that's why we're clicking.
Yeah,
because, I can remember when I was in school, and I was reading stuff in the books, and I'd go home and ask my mom, and she's like, okay, well, that's completely wrong. Why are they teaching any of these lies? They've changed a little bit. They're starting to let the truth come out, and some of these characters that we thought were one way are really turning out to be, other. A little bit of truth.
In the West, a lot of times, which side of the law you were on, depending on which state you were in. Mm-hmm. You would, in fact, you could be a outright criminal in New Mexico, and then come over to Arizona. A couple of years later, you're a sheriff.
Wow.
A lot just depends on, if you're hungry, you're going to steal a cow. Mm-hmm. So you're a rustler. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You come over here, get a job as a deputy sheriff, you're a lawman.
Yep.
So
it's amazing. And the dime novels did a lot of it, too. Because I know there was a lot of, criminals who were criminals that said, you know what, put this in your book. And made up all the stories and made it sound bigger and badder and everything else. Because the dime novels were the comic books and newspapers of today, So that changed a lot of it and, made everybody's story sound more grandiose, if you want to say. And that,
you got to sell books.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And I thought one of the really fun things was, because you found out about history and you debunked something else. I hate that word. Disproved or changed something. And that's with everybody bellying up to the bar asking for, give me a whiskey, give me a beer. Because we know water was no good, but you found out they were drinking something else. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, if you look, if you watch the movies, everybody bellies up to the bars and they give me a shot of whiskey. Or give me a bottle and a shot glass. Uh-huh. Most of the Westerners drank champagne or mixed drinks.
Isn't that funny?
All the time. If you look at the old ads for the saloons, you'll find a whole list of fancy mixed drinks, and that's what they drank. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And part of that was because the whiskey was so bad.
It's just awful.
Just awful. But mixed drinks were far more popular than just the shot of whiskey. But, I was writing one of my novels, and I was talking to one of my editors, and I was putting that in the novel, and she said, "Look, we know it's accurate, but nobody's going to believe it."
You see, that's what happens. That's so funny because it's hard to imagine, rough and tumble cowboy.
If you go back to Tombstone, they had telephones at Tombstone, and I wanted to write a scene with Wyatt Earp on the telephone, and she said, "I know it can happen, but nobody's going to believe it. They're going to, they're going to think you make it up." Yeah,
that's something. See, we can't even tell the truth because nobody will believe it, right?
Exactly.
That's so
but
funny.
That's for the novels. In our books, it's 100% truth.
Exactly. And like I said, that's on this show, that's all I ask people. Come on here and tell it so we can match it, because that's what I was clicking with you when I would hear you tell your, speak your interviews. And, if you could get past all the, well, tell me, how to prove, and that's a bunch of bunk. You got, come with me and watch it. You'll leave a believer. That's, you got, or not. It's up to you. It's your personal thing, right? Because, it's just, I've seen too much, Dan. You've seen too much or had this stuff happen, and you've got these characters coming back to you, telling you what life was like then, and it's amazing, and it's so interesting. I just don't know what to say. I mean, the book is fabulous. It's a real page-turner. The only time I think you in that book or any other that you say that you've had anything yell at you to leave or anything like that was a miner trying to warn you that it was an unsafe place. Is that correct?
Yeah. You go into when we go into a haunted house or a haunted place, and we hear. If you go in and you're expecting to hear demonic activity and you hear a thump on the wall, you're going to go, "Oh!"
Yeah.
It's demonic. If we go into a place and hear a thump on the wall, we go, "Hey, that was a thump on the wall. Would you do that again?"
Yeah.
We're trying to learn.
Right.
So we're trying to keep an open mind. So we're down in this mine. I mean, it's an old abandoned mine. I mean, not a historic site or anything like that. It's just an old mine. Dwight and I are way, way, way down in it. And we hear a rock fall. We go, pop. Okay, a rock falls. And I say, well, if you did that on purpose, would you do it again? Pop, another rock falls. So that could be coincidence, or it could be something else. And then Dwight said, "Hey, we're getting a warning. He wants us out of here." He says, I said, "Well, what? Is this one of those get out moments?" And Dwight says, "No." He says, "This is not a safe place for us, and we need to get out of here." But he was warning us. You're in an old abandoned mine. It was near the highway, so this thing could cave in at any moment. So the only quote get out moment was get out for your own safety.
Yeah.
Every other experience we've had has been mostly pleasant, some delightful, some very emotional, and some just conversational. But never a negative experience at all. Not even close.
That's wonderful. And again, like I said in the beginning, it's chemistry. You're going to go in with a certain energy, and like you say too, you've got your own protection, you've got your own little thing that you do too, and all of that is going to let in the vibration that you're putting out. So you're not going to get those, there's probably people in the same room that are over there having a fight or, getting shot again and again or killing or whatever, but they're not going to probably talk to you. You're going to draw in these others. I'm surprised that you got the sad little Chinese man that killed his brother.
I think, again, this is just my opinion, my 2 cents worth, but I think that Chinese guy felt our energy and knew that we could help him out. And I think that's what kind of drew us into it. It was so powerful and so strong. He was just desperate. I think it was that energy. He felt our positive energy. As tired as we were, he felt our positive energy and said, "These folks can help us."
I agree 100%. And again, that's what we said in the beginning. When these groups go in, when you have that band, the music just is beautiful and it clicks and you could play on forever and it feels like just a minute. And then somebody else go up there and hack the song all to pieces and not understand why it didn't sound good. And that's just the way it is. That's the way this whole wonderful paranormal supernatural realm is, and I think what you guys are doing is absolutely wonderful. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the websites? I know it has a funny name. It's got 2 E's. It's BE, like the bee that buzzes.
Yeah, it's www.believeparanormal, all one word, and it's BEE, believe, 2 E's, believeparanormal.com. And you can go to that site, and you can actually, when you buy the book, or you can go right now if you want. But when you read a chapter, and if there's an EVP recorded, you can go to that website and click on it, and you can actually hear the EVP that you just read about. And we're adding to that all the time.
That's so neat. And because it's almost like an interactive experience. Not only do you have all the conversations in there, what they're telling you and how they're explaining stuff and how you have to go about it, but you've got that too so you can hear it. And I think that's just terrific. That's
one of the things that surprised me is... in each chapter, not only do we have the history of the location, and not only do we have the spirit recording if we got one, but we have a transcript of all the conversations of me, Dwight, and Rhonda, and when the spirit joins in, and so you get a real feeling of what it's actually like to participate in a paranormal experience, and people seem to be drawn to that.
Yes, I think, and I definitely know my listeners will, because they're looking for that next level of, okay, we're past the fact of this and this and this and this. We want to know what they're saying. What are they telling us? What are they going through? Why did they choose not to cross? Did they choose not to cross? That kind of thing. I've actually had listeners call up and say, ask the guests what they think is, how to, what do they call it? Ghost prevention.
How do you...
well, how do you prevent from being a ghost? Because they want to cross. You know what I mean? Isn't that funny? But it's true if you think about it. And we sit here and talk about it and say, well, from all the ghosts that I've talked to, and I bet you all the ghosts that you have too, the thing that's holding them back is regret or despair, reliving fear. Yep. All those earthly things, so.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that once they cross over, they apparently, from everything that we've researched, they can come back and just relive all the happy stuff. They don't have to go. They don't have to go back to the miserable stuff. They can go back to the wedding or to the party or to the night out with the boys or whatever.
Or watch over their family and see. Yeah. I don't know how much they can interact, but I've had my own family members interact, come over and, get involved in stuff or come through somebody and tell me, don't do that.
They're just checking in to see how you're doing.
Yep. And I'll tell you, Dan, I totally understand. Now, I've never tramped around in the mountains, in the desert heat, with jumping over rattlesnakes, for Pete's sakes.
All part of it.
Isn't that wonderful?
I did some dancing last weekend.
I bet you did.
Whoa.
Yes. And see, people don't realize that, too. When you're out looking for missing persons, you're doing this stuff, too. So, I know we've been light and having a good time, but I personally would like to thank you for your dedication that you put in. I mean, we're talking over 15 years here of trying to help families with closure or maybe find a missing person. Your book, They Are Not Lost. Wonderful.
The true stories.
Oh, gosh, yes.
It's documented.
Yes. And I highly recommend that book to people. And I know you probably get asked, what do you think about all these missing people and stuff like that? But that's a whole nother show, because I know there's a lot of psychics that get involved in that and go, I don't know, there's a lot of sticky stuff going on there, I think. But people go missing, and they go missing for a lot of different reasons. And, if we can get them home, we can get them home. But it's people like you. You didn't do it for the reward money. You didn't do it for the notoriety. You did it because it was what you felt you needed to do. And I want to personally thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Because, it takes a good man to jump over rattlesnakes to find somebody they don't even know. So
it was not necessarily a good man, just a fast man.
Just a fast man. Amen. You're Billy Jacking it out there. That's hysterical.
You wouldn't believe it. I can do the moonwalk. Yes, I can.
Well, you said you got the Cherokee blood, and Billy Jack was Cherokee, so that's all part of it. So, yeah, but that's amazing. And the new book, do you have a name for the new book that's coming out?
Not yet. We've got a working title, but it's not a definitive book. But It's basically, right now, the working title is Conversations with Spirits of the Wild West.
Oh.
That's just a working title. We want to emphasize the conversation part. But I think that's one of the things that makes our books really unique is we have these extended conversations.
Oh, sure.
It's just not grasp a word here. It's,
right.
Talk.
And that's your show. There's so many out there that I'm finding now that are doing just this, Dan. And I think it's wonderful. I think we're coming back to that. I like I said, I do it too. And it must have took me, I think I've stood out there for 2 hours talking to a poor soldier, trying to get him to understand, that he didn't have to stay there anymore. And it really is, it's almost like therapy. And sometimes you have to go back and do it again and again and again. And I'm so glad you're working on Maddie with that. And I just really feel that you've got a good chance to get her across. And if you do, please throw me a text or something to say she's gone over. I just want to know.
Definitely. I've got your email. We'll stay in touch for sure. I'll let you know when the new book comes out.
Absolutely do. And thank you so much. I'm going to let you go have a nice evening and, just relax. And thank you so, so much for spending this time with us on this side of the gate. My listeners are just going to love this. I think you're very, very special. And I'd love to have you and oh, hang on, I forgot their name. Rhonda.
Rhonda Ho,
yeah. If you'd ever like to come on together and just discuss it, just feel at home. Make yourself at home.
We'll let you know for sure.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, hon. Thank you so much to Mr. Dan Baldwin for coming in and spending that time with us. Just fascinating. They're doing a lot of good work out there, and it's hot. And it's dusty. It's in Arizona in the Superstition Mountains. What a wonderful look into history that was. I wish him all the luck. I mean that with my whole heart on Maddie. That poor darling. She suffered enough, and I know we can all connect into that. I mean, enough's enough. Let's send her some prayers and energy if you're of the mind, and just help that poor girl think that she can go over. She's just as worthy as anybody else, right? You can find Mr. Baldwin's books, and I tell you, listeners, there is a ton of them. He's got both fiction and nonfiction. He's got a whole series of Old West stories, and some of the books I think are wonderful. The Practical Pendulum. So if you're thinking about maybe taking up something to do a little communication, look into that. The Psychic Detective Guidebook, and this is a book where he goes through and asks a lot of his psychic friends too for advice. If they were to give advice to somebody who is interested in this, what would that advice be, and how do they do their thing? So it's not just him, and he puts it all together just beautifully. They Are Not Lost. True Cases of Psychic Detecting. Fantastic book. And the one we were discussing tonight, again, I'm going to say it again, it's a wonderful book, Speaking with the Spirits of the Old West. Now, all of those books are available on 4 Nights, F-O-U-R, Nights, K-N-I-G-H-T-S, Press. Or you can get them, of course, on Amazon Kindle. He's got a wonderful page there. Barnes & Noble, all the good bookstores. I highly recommend. But if you're going to start with one, pick up this one on the Old West. The conversations, the history told by those who lived it, the fantastic, crossing over and coming back, and the stuff that they tell you about how they see the afterlife. It's just wonderful, and I can't wait for the new book to come out. We thank him so much. I also wanted to mention, don't forget, you've got code Cisco, SYSCO, for Scotty the NJ Medium. Don't forget, go to his website, scottydhenjmedium.com, and if you give him the code for your first reading, you get 10% off. And that is going to be a fantastic reading. Go in there, go to the website, go to his Facebook page, and read the reviews. They're phenomenal. Scotty is spot on. I know he also does paranormal investigations with PARS, so if you are in the New Jersey area, I know he travels a little further than that, but I can't be 100% sure where. Just contact Scotty and talk to him. But they do come in and do investigations. They're wonderfully chronicled throughout, so you can go in there. He talks a lot about his investigations, of course, keeping the client, their privacy. But he's great. And if you're also interested in psychic development and, your mediumship directions and things like that you want to take, or you're just interested in it, all of his stuff is in there, and it's in there. The information is in there for free. He has wonderful blogs. He has fantastic people that come in there and put in their add to the blogs as well. Tammy Knighton is one of them. She's just terrific. She's an angel reader. So don't forget, Scotty the NJ Medium. I don't know how long this code is going to last, so make sure you get in there and give him code Cisco and get your percentage off, because, boy, he can really answer some questions and help you get, some guidance or just make you feel better about yourself and your day. It's terrific. Scotty is great. Also, if you are interested at all in helping out this podcast, it's a free podcast. I'm trying to keep it free. Help us out if you can. If you're of a mind, buy a sticker, a T-shirt, a mug, a crispy pillow, and you can hold it tight while you listen to the podcast. It gets a little scary. We do all of our logo art. Little Crispy, our little ghost mascot, who's just a little bit afraid of ghosts himself. He doesn't know he's a ghost. That's okay. But he's just cute as a bug. And he's on so many mugs and notebooks and stickers of all different kinds. There's like at least 14 different designs with him. And our cover art, our monsters cover art is on there. And our haunted microphone and just some fun stuff. It is tpublic.com/user/Cisco. Or look in our show notes and you can just click that link and go right there and pick you out something. And the podcast gets a little bit of that. And we appreciate everybody who's purchased them. A lot of people are sporting their mugs and getting their T-shirts. We've got pictures of them on our Facebook group page. And that is Journey Through the Gate. And it is Gatekeepers, Journey Through the Gate, Paranormal Portal Podcast Gatekeepers. And that is Facebook. Also, that link will be in our show notes. Links to Mr. Baldwin's website and the Believe, B-E-E, Leave, paranormal.com, and that's where all the videos are. You'll see all the EVPs that go with the books, with the book. That's in there. And it was just a fabulous conversation, and we can't thank you enough. And if you have your own ghost story, you have your own experiences with the uncanny, please let us know. I'll read your story, or maybe you could come on and read it for us, and we're going to do a listener compilation. So send it to journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. So it's been a fabulous night, and I just love this. This is part of our Spooktacular Boo Bash, and I love each and every one of our listeners. Please pass the podcast along, or, get them a mug and fill it with, their favorite adult beverage, or something like that. Make them a gift basket if they like podcasts, and hook them up to the podcast that, we've got a lot of gift giving time coming up too, and Halloween. Who doesn't give gifts on Halloween? I do, don't you? So think about that. And, the best advice I could give anybody, because obviously we know, this stuff exists. So keep your feet under the covers and keep your closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night.